Hello and welcome. What does story say? I'm your host, Dr. Pauline Baird, cultural bearer from the village of Buxton, Guyana. And as you know, I tell our stories, our family histories, our whispered stories, our practice hidden and sometimes long lost traditions. As we say in the village, what does story say? Come and sit down. To our first time viewers, welcome. To our seasoned veterans, family, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. We're going to talk about village. At this time when it's emancipation, and I have stories for you. Buckle up. Buxton. Buxton Village. Buxton. Buxton? Buxton. Which one you like to say? Some people think when you say Buxton, you're talking broke up. You're talking Creolese. And if you say Buxton, you're talking the Queen's English. Which one you like? To address this seeming dilemma or discrepancy or privilege or preference, let's talk a little bit of linguistics. I assure you, I won't bore you, I won't be long. In linguistics, we have something called free variation. That means you can say a word in many ways. We can say Buxton, we can say Buxton. But when we say Buxton, what's happening with the language? You see, we have two syllables, Buxton, X-T, consonants. They come together. And sometimes we have what we call a glottal stop. That means you swallow the T and you say Buxton. You swallow the T. So nothing wrong with saying Buxton. You know a man named President Clinton and his wife Hillary Clinton? It's the same thing, glottal stop. But there's more behind this name Buxton or Buxton. So sit down and buckle up. Loud talk story. You see, a long time ago, the Africans decided to help themselves by purchasing plantations. I talked about plantation Northbrook, and I'm going to talk about plantation New Orange Nassau that is relevant to this whole Buxton narrative. Buxton was purchased outright from a man named James Holmes on the east coast of Demerara. At that time, the land area was called New Orange Nassau. It was about 380 acres. The property changed hands in April 1840, and a number of Africans purchased it. How many Negroes purchased the plantation, you ask? According to the record, 128 Negroes, that they call them back then, purchased this plantation. Have you ever wondered where the Africans came from who purchased the plantation? Did they really live on this area called Buxton? Well, the purchasers came from Annandale, Nomprel, and Lusignan, to name a few. Well, they didn't have a line of credit, as they say. They had to come up with real hard cash. So some people say they dug up their money and they paid. But the long and short of it is this. They paid $50,000 for the plantation. $28,000 down cash. So 1841, January 2nd, Buxton had their transport. And before the end of the year, they paid off this thing.
Purchase of Buxton is always compared to Victoria.
Their transport changed hands on January 4th. So you see, Buxton outdid Victoria. Well, Buxton had a different story. They had this loggie. It was 62 feet by 22 feet. You know what loggie is?
Lodges were commonly called range houses. They accommodated a number of families in individual units. They were said to be built by East Indian immigrants who came to Guyana as indentured laborers.
The loggie had slate roof. I don't know if you guys remember slate roof in houses. My grandmother had her cottage there, and when they repaired the roof, its pure slate came off. So we used to break off pieces of slate to write on our slate. Well, basically, I dated myself. I went to school when they had slates. And slates were the instrument for writing and stuff like that, right? And they also had a copper. Young people, you know what's a copper? It's a big iron tank that can carry water. That was what on the property as part of the estate. And this copper could hold 10,000 gallons of water. So they had a water source. Buxton also had managers and overseers living quarters or dwellings. These dwellings were like small houses where the people who were in position to be bosses and so on lived. So there was definitely some status regulations or differences in status among the people working on the plantation, the overseers and the enslaved, right? There was also a hospital and a stable. Oh, and by the way, they had boat. They had a schooner that came with the property. So you see, the place was not bereft of accommodations or anything. It was just abandoned and nothing at all. They had some assets. And so when we look at the history of Buxton, we can see that there were people there, there were things there, they could start life or continue life in the way that they chose. But that's not to say it was very fruitful, because a lot of shrubbery was there, and the plantation had certainly gone to pots, and the Africans would have had to revive it. They would have planted plantain groves and stuff like that. And the new owners of New Orange, Nassau, gave it another name, and it was called Buxton, or Buxton as we know it. Well, the record says that the name Buxton is like the third evolution of that name. I'm going to tell you what I read. It says here, perhaps, Plantation New Orange, Nassau reverted to its old name, Buxton. In the Royal Gazette of November 4, 1843, a correspondent writes, New Orange, Nassau was called Buxton or Buxton before it was named New Orange, Nassau. The name had nothing to do with Thomas Fowles Buxton. And I learned in school that Buxton was named after Thomas Fowles Buxton. That might be so, but there's a record that contests that thing. So, this is the story. You get it? I'm citing Cruikshank's work. Baba Eyusi Guyana also talk about this name of Buxton in his book, Buxton Friendship in Print and Memory. So you can go check it out. So, you know something. What have Africans contributed to Guyana? They civilized that place. They brought entrepreneurship to that place. They showed mettle and what you call stick-to-itiveness and grit to get the property. Because remember, after they were so-called emancipated, they had to work 2 years on a plantation and earn pittance. After, some records say, 40 hours of working, then they could get paid. And with that money, they purchased the plantation. Whereas the enslavers were given free money to be compensated for the loss of humans that they exploited. So, Yawa good. Like, share, subscribe, follow. Thank you.